So what we're about to do here is a demonstration of value drawing with this small still life that I've set up. And I'm going to be using, to begin with, I'm going to be using compressed and vine charcoal. Have the compressed charcoal here. It looks a lot like that. Sometimes they're very brittle, so oftentimes they'll break into little pieces, but don't be dismayed. They still work quite well. And if you can think of drawing as a notation system, a way of like sort of taking notes on your observation, it's a great way to start. And one of the things you'll start to see is that there's a difference between what it is that you think you're seeing and what it is that is actually there as you begin the process. So I think about drawing as a way to actually crystallize our ability to see. We have a light source coming more strongly from the right-hand side, and in a drawing, oftentimes I like to indicate which direction my light source is coming from. Some people like to make a little, just a little mark at the top of their page. And I'm working with, this is a piece of vine charcoal, which is very lightweight. And as you can see, it's very malleable. Like you can actually, landscape painters, people who do portraits, people who make paintings that are layered will often use this kind of charcoal. The other thing we use it for is for an additive or a subtractive technique. So you can work with line and you can begin to construct, as I did this arrow, or you can begin to work with tone. One of the first things I like to do is I like to pay attention to, I don't hold my drawing tool the way I hold a pencil. And I like to use my whole arm. So as I'm starting to make my marks here, I'm starting to just make marks as little coordinates. And you might notice that I'm just leaving behind a little tracing. If I want to move it, I can move it. But, and I'm sort of composing a bit. For demonstration purposes, I want to make sure that I put these things where I don't want to just randomly place them. I want them to be, I want to create something of visual interest. I also want to make sure that this object on the right, this shell, is slightly in front of this other shell and sort of framing these two eggs. So what I'm going to be doing is sort of laying this thing out and boxing these in a way that it might make some sense to you. I'm going to take this piece of charcoal and pay close attention. I just broke it in half. Oh my gosh. And I like to use it to start to create my negative spaces. I like to use the side of it so that I'm not working with line as much as I'm working with value. And we'll come back on this just a little bit. Maybe use a little bit of line to indicate my areas. And I like to just find some coordinates here. You know? And if I need to move them, if I need to adjust them, I'm going to look at the relationship between here and here. I think this needs to be a little further over. I want to lay it in there like that. And I'm also paying attention to the fact that these objects are sitting on, almost like a plateau, almost like a little stage setting. And I want to be able to place them inside of this little plateau. I've got some high contrast action between the figure, which is the shell, and the ground, which is the area that it's not. And I'm just going to begin to rough this shape in a little bit. Don't need to spend a lot of time there right now, but I just want to get my things laid out in relationship. Bring this down just a little bit. Okay, I got the axes of those little pucker points coming through here, and this guy terminates about here. Okay, so I'm just sort of roughing this in, and maybe I'll indicate very gently Um, I sound like Bob Ross. Very gently, just where some of these points are. Like I said, it's shorthand. It really is a kind of visual shorthand for what you see. You don't have to grab it all at once, and you can even it out a little bit, okay? And you'll also find that you might want to make corrections. Like I'm finding this little swoop to be a little more extreme. And then I'm going to sight my way into this drawing by using my thumb and my tool, and I'm realizing that this distance at my arm's length, okay, I want to recreate that here, okay? And I also want to pay attention to the relationship, the space relationship between the objects. So I see this horizon line here, this white area coming in about there. And then here's the shape of one of these, the top of one of these egg orbs. Remember, the light source is coming from this side. So I'm just going to begin to lay it in just a little bit, because this side of the egg is brighter. The right-hand side is more illuminated than the left-hand side. In order to create the illusion of volume, okay, we use our value scales. And start to rough that in a little bit. I don't need to finish it. I just want to get things in place. Okay? I'm also noticing that one of the things that helps me to read the top of that egg surface, the top of that sphere, is its relationship, again, just like we did with the shell, is its relationship to the ground behind it. Can't get a grab on that. So I'm going to rough that in just a little bit. No need to worry if you overlap into the surface, because you can start to, you'll be working it. So this area between here and here is almost like a black and white relationship. This is all going to be, notice I'm kind of composing here as well. And then of course we have another shape here that is somewhat, it's in front of this one. There's barely a little bit of overlap. I want to get that. I want to make sure I get that piece in there too. And I'm working with my whole arm. I'm trying not to use my writing grip, but I'm trying to use my drawing grip. Again, consistently in drawing, in naturalistic drawing, if your light source is coming from the same side, every part of that. Every left-hand side of any solid object is going to be in shadow, or in a darker shadow. So as we come through this egg here, we've got our horizon line here, and we got another set of shell. I started to rough that in here. And this one also gets illuminated, nice catch, gets illuminated by what's behind it. So I'm going to pull this dark down here like that. I'm going to pull it across this way like that. Remember, this is all with vine charcoal, so this stuff is really soft. And at a certain point, I tell my students this. You might think that you've got a really black there, but when you take a step back from that image, that object you're drawing, you may start to see that you really have sort of an elaborate grayscale, or the beginnings of one. So remember I said this side here, okay, is not catching. I want to make sure I get the axis of this set of little spokies on this shell. They're kind of going in that direction. One of the ways you can find that is by using your drawing stick or your tool or your pencil or whatever you're using and finding that axis. Like put it there and make sure that the axis that you have in your drawing corresponds with that. Okay? If you remember one more time, this is really a kind of shorthand, you know? And I find the bottom edge of this, kind of bring it up here. It's got a nice sort of swoopy gesture to it. And I just keep working it until it seems to be a good notation of the thing that I want to observe. This goes for all kinds of drawings. So what you can see here is that at this point I'm sort of using a more additive technique, where I'm adding my darks. I'm going to very quickly show you that this, as I begin to follow this edge down here, that if I were to be dissatisfied with the shape that I've drawn, I can just wipe right through it. Also, at this point, we have what we would call an underdrawing. Now, I'm going to change materials here, and I'm going to use a rather hard piece. I'm going to use the hard weight of this is called compressed charcoal. The difference between these two is that this is a stick from a grapevine leaf, and it's just put into an oven and reduced until it's just carbon. This is compressed in a ground, compressed, and baked. So you might be able to see, in fact you will be able to see in a second, that when I begin to lay in these negative shapes here, like that, as a big broad stroke, that I can create a really hard contrast. And it can be quite dramatic to use it in drawing.